بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
يا أيها الذين آمنوا قوا أنفسكم وأهليكم نارا وقودها الناس والحجارة عليها ملائكة غلاظ شداد لا يعصون الله ما أمرهم ويفعلون ما يؤمرون.
بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وبعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So of course it's a great pleasure here to be joining this weekend seminar, or the extended weekend we should say, which is to plant now and harvest later, with a focus on the youth, meaning hoping to plant seeds and then later, not now, but later to reap the harvest. So the better the planting and the more fertile the soil, the better care given, the better quality the crop will be when it's time to harvest the fruits. So in this session together, the title, which is Proactive Parenting, and this title is derived from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, in which he talks about the nature of the child and their development as they grow into adults. So the Prophet ﷺ, as you can see with the handout that you have in front of you, this is the outline to today's session number 1 and session number 2 tomorrow. The Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned that every child born, kullu mawludin yuladu ala al-fitra, that every child that is born, they are born with a natural inclination, with the fitrah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has instilled in them. And Allah Azza wa Jal, He has created this fitrah that we're considering to be the disposition of the creature, or the human being in this case. And you notice that in nature, other living beings, they also have a fitrah of their own, or a disposition, a nature about them, unique to each living being. When you look at various different animals that are out there, you find that when they're born, there are things that they automatically do. That's just the way they were created. Some creatures, when they are born, immediately they stand up for their survival, because they have to begin to move. They can't lie there until their muscles develop and then try to learn how to walk and run away from predators, but they have to get up immediately, and then they begin to move along with the herd. There are animals, most obvious example which comes to mind are sea turtles, for example. They live the majority of their life in the ocean, but they come onto land to bury the eggs. And then the eggs, they hatch. And the hatchlings, what do? Where do they go? They go inland to the city? No, they go right back to the ocean. Were they taught to do that? Was the mother waiting there to say, hey, let's go, we live in the water, that's where our livelihood is, that's where our food is? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created them in such a way that when they come out of their egg, most of them, if not all of them, they head back into the ocean, where they will live, and they will prosper, they will grow, and the species will continue. The human being has a similar nature to it, a fitrah that was there. The hadith says, فَأَبَوَاهُ يُهَوِّدَانِهِ أَوْ يُنَصِّرَانِهِ أَوْ يُمَجِّسَانِهِ, that it's the parents that will either change that natural inclination and disposition of the child, one being pure, one inclined towards the worship of Allah, one inclined towards the acknowledgement of a creator, a divine being, and they will change that either, as the hadith says specifically, to become Christian or to become Jew or to become of the, he says, Yumajjisani, those that were fire worshippers at the time. So the parent has the option, the choice, to either actively cultivate that disposition of the child, that fitrah, to enrich it, meaning to add to it, to supplement, to encourage and watch it develop and grow, as is the objective of the Sharia, or they can harm that. They can hinder that development in error, meaning they don't know what they're doing. They're just stabbing at it blindly, trying to just raise kids and raise a family in error, or they can destroy it out of negligence. They're not doing anything, but they're on the sidelines, as we say. They're not in the game, but they're on the sidelines, and they're just watching as things play out. Let's just see how the kids are going to turn out. Tawakkalna ala Allah. We put our trust in Allah. But if we don't take the necessary measures and steps, al-asbab, then our trust has not truly been recognized and implemented in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's trust. So today, a lot of the difficulties that we face with the youth, the difficulties, they don't appear immediately when the child is still very young. But they begin to appear when they get into their adolescent years, when they get into their teenage years. And then it continues into their 20s, into their 30s, and into their 40s as they have been put on a set path. So, as is the objective of our workshop here and the seminar altogether, to plant now, to think now, to act now, to invest now, so that when the child grows into a young adult, we can see the fruits of our labor. So the first thing that a parent does, and I'm talking about proactive parenting, and this is to be proactive, meaning it's to take the initiative, to think forward. And this is a weakness that many people suffer from, is that they're short-sighted in their vision. They're thinking about today, they're thinking about tomorrow, and that's about all that they're thinking about. But as Muslims, we need to be thinking about 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now. Where do I want to see myself? Where do I want to see my family? How do I picture my children in their development and what they're going to be? We can't think about today only, but we also have to plan for tomorrow. This is proactive. Proactive as opposed to being inactive or being simply reactive. That I will only do something when I absolutely have to respond to an issue. I have to react. And in my line of work, the reaction is normally, the kid is 14, 15, 16. The first time I see them, the parent brings them to the office and says, this has happened, that's happened, do something. As a reaction to a problem they've brought, this has happened, that's happened, this problem, that problem, they're doing this, that, and the other. Then I say, where have you been for the last 10 years, the last 15 years? What have you been doing? So this is reactionary. So the first step for a parent is to accept responsibility. And this, the most proactive person, they do this before they even get married. They accept the responsibility of being a parent before they even get married. They recognize a person that is at the age of marriage, that marriage is not just about fulfilling the desires. That, of course, is one of its purposes. But the result of that is children and offspring. Children and offspring are going to come about, and this is another one of the objectives of getting married, is to bring about an increase in the ummah, if you will, to sustain the population at the very least, to continue on. The Prophet ﷺ, he encouraged a number of qualities to be sought for in a spouse, in a wife in particular, that she be loving and that she be childbearing, so that the ummah can increase in number. So the acknowledgement of responsibility, the accepting of that responsibility, second, has to happen very early on when you want to be proactive, to see the nature of the responsibility. وَكُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْعُولٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهِ. That everyone is a shepherd and they are going to be asked about their responsibility. They're going to be asked about their flock. The man is a shepherd for his house. The woman is a shepherd for her household. And to the end, as the hadith mentions, their responsibility, every single one of us, we will be asked about that responsibility. And this is an enormous responsibility for a parent, to raise a child. Many times you'll hear parents, they ask or they request, what are the rights of the parents? What are the rights of the parents? They say, listen, please tell my children my rights over them. Let's have a khutbah about the rights of the parents and the obligations of the children. They should respect and honor and listen and behave and to the end of it, etc., etc. Many times you hear this request, please tell my child his duties towards me as a parent. In all honesty, I have yet to hear a request from a parent to say, please explain to me the rights of my children. There has not been a parent come to my office and say, listen, please tell me my obligations towards my children. Because the children, they have rights as well. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, وَإِنَّ لِوَلَدِكَ عَلَيْكَ حَقًّا. Indeed, your child, they have a right over you. There's an obligation that you have and a duty that you have to them. And from the first of those duties and obligations, rights, if you will, that the child has over the parent, begins before they're born. And that is the selection of a good teammate or partner, if you will, a husband or a wife. To select a good spouse. These are from the rights the child has over the parent. Many times we think about our obligations as parents. There are things that are, when the child is born, they're ceremonial obligations. When the child is born, the parents are very happy and excited. They may call the adhan in the ear of the child, so the first words they hear are La ilaha illallah. They may feed them something sweet, as was the custom of the Prophet ﷺ. They may practice, of course, as obligatory for the boys, circumcision. Then they will prepare a sacrifice, showing gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by offering an aqiqah. They will invite the community together. We'll have dinner. We'll enjoy the time. We'll give them a good name. We'll call them Muhammad or Abdullah or Abdurrahman or one of the names of the prophets. All ceremonial rights. But the child's spiritual development, the rights that they have, are much greater and long-lasting than they are these few days after their birth. So this type of development, of course, it begins with the selection of the spouse, someone that will help you out, someone that's on the same page, that has a family also. This is also a contributing factor, that they have family that can help support as well. You know, every culture recognizes that to raise a child, it takes the community. As they say, it takes a village. This is very, very true. It takes a team. It takes everyone to help raise and develop a child, to help produce a quality member of society. So us living here in this situation as minorities, there was a little, this is a side story here, when I was in Medina, and I was living there in the dorm. I had a friend of mine who we came together from the same state, and we ended up dorming together. And then we noticed, living in Medina, the children there's a lot of opportunity for them in terms of religious development and learning. So many of the kids, they would go off to school, of course, and the school was public school, but it was Islamic school at the same time. For the most part, the private schools you find the private schools being the secular schools. They teach you the English curriculum and the secular studies, and they focus on all of that. But the government-run public schools, they had a very strong religious curriculum, a focus on teaching Islam, memorizing Quran. And then after school, they would have tahfidh programs to memorize the Quran from Salat al-Asr until Salat al-Maghrib. And you would find the masajid filled with young children. And in the neighborhood that I lived in after I moved out of the dorms, I saw all of the young kids after Asr running to their sheikh to teach them the Quran and memorize, and they would sit in circles, and you would go to the Prophet's masjid if you went during that time, and you would find there's 20, 30, 40, 50 circles of memorization going on with those children. And so we were sitting, my friend and I, we were discussing an issue, comparing and contrasting between there in Al-Madinah and here. So he said, let's talk about, and I accepted Islam in my college years. So I had no really understanding of what it means to grow up as a Muslim kid. He said, but he did. He grew up, he went to Islamic school all the way up till 12th grade, and then went off to college for a couple of years, and he said, listen, I want to tell you, let's talk about expectations. He said, when you look at a kid here in Medina, a Muslim kid, there are expectations that have been set of them. He said, what defines a good kid here in this community? So we started to look at the qualities. He prays in congregation. He comes with his father to the masjid. That means he comes for Fajr and Dhuhr and Asr and Maghrib and Isha, even Fajr. A lot of times you hear parents, they say, oh, you have to be easy, you have to be gentle, you have to be kind. Don't be hard on them. Don't be hard on the young kids to bring them to the prayer. Ya akhi, the reason you're saying that is because you find it very hard on yourself. You find it very hard on yourself. And you see it as a burden. If you saw it as something enriching and beneficial, then you would bring them with you. So they would come and you see them in the masjid. What else? After Asr, they go for tahfidh. You're going to expect that the kid, by the time he reaches 13 or 14, he's memorized the Quran. You'll expect that he's memorized some small treatise, some mutun, some small works of aqeedah or fiqh or Arabic nahu or grammar or something. He said he's very respectable young man or woman. They treat their parents very kindly, they're very nice. When you visit the home, and this is something that I experienced, when you come in and you sit with the man of the house, it's the young children that come and they bring you the coffee and the dates and the food, and they tend to their guests. And they speak very politely and very kindly. These are the expectations that we could identify from the outside world. He said, let me talk to you about what I experienced. He told me, he said, the expectations of a good Muslim here in our communities in America, he said, the expectations are this. They haven't been arrested. They're not on drugs. They're not pregnant or haven't gotten someone pregnant, meaning out of marriage, outside of marriage. And then he began to name these. They haven't. He did not name for me, they did. He says, you'll see them around occasionally. You'll see them on Jummah, you'll see them on Eid. These are the good kids. So this is the expectations that a lot of communities we have here with our children. Many of us, we have very high worldly expectations. I'm sending my kid to the best school, he's going to the best university, he's going to get the best job, he's going to get the highest wage, he's going to marry the most beautiful wife, he's going to have the biggest house, he's going to have the nicest car, he's going to dress in the finest clothes. We have many expectations and hopes for our children in this regard, but as parents, if you're proactive You have to raise the expectations for their religious life as well. The expectations have to be raised. The Prophet ﷺ, he said in a hadith, "Saddidu wa qaribu." You know this hadith? "Saddidu wa qaribu." It essentially means take aim and get close, if you will. And he explained it to one of the companions, saying that just like when you pull back your arrow in the bow, when you're going to release it, you aim at the bullseye. And then it should get somewhere close to it. Meaning if you're going to just randomly point the bow when you're trying to hit the target, just pull back and shoot it, and then hope it gets there somewhere. But you have to have purpose, and you have to have intent, and you have to have precision. And we have a similar saying that if you aim for the stars, you may end up on the moon. Right? You may achieve something great. You may not meet the goal that you were after, but you will certainly not be somewhere lowly and have not accomplished anything. So that goes with our kids, is that the expectations have to be set high around the board. Across the board. Their worldly expectations, yes, bismillah. Set them very high. You should be this. You should be successful. But we cannot sacrifice their religious development, their Islamic development. This would be a total loss. This would be a destruction out of ignorance and error. So the expectations have to be very high. And this is something that parents, that we have to do from the very beginning. The next thing, if you're following along here, is their development and education. And this development and education of the children, it begins with the parents' development and education. If the parents don't have anything to give, then what would the child be expected to receive? If you don't have anything yourself, you can't give anything to others. So as parents, we have to be actively engaged in learning the faith. We have to be active in learning about Islam and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. How to go about doing things, how to understand situations and circumstances. Many of us here, as I'm looking around, we come from a different culture. We come from a different country, perhaps. We come from a different society. So one of the first things that we have to do is we have to adjust our cultural expressions of faith. We are, even though we may be from Egypt or from Pakistan or from Bangladesh or from wherever we may be from, our kids, if they are being raised here, they are only going to have just a little bit of that. They're only going to have just a little bit of that cultural experience that's confined to your home and the homes of your relatives that they may visit. They are going to be living in a very different culture. They're going to be learning things in a very different way. So we have to adjust our cultural expressions of faith. That which worked for us over where we're from originally, it may not work here. Cultural expectations, they will not be the same. And we also have to strive hard to correct any errors that we have inherited through cultural learning. A lot of times, coming from a Muslim society, we're not required to be as actively involved in learning because it was just given to us. It was inherited from our family and our relatives, from our community. We were just told and we accepted it and we took. And through this process of inheritance, often mistakes can be transferred along the way. So to be proactive, we have to be engaged in order to identify the correct thing in our belief, in our worship, and in our manner, so that what we're passing down and imparting to our children, it's authentic and it's correct. This is extremely, extremely important, so that we are not teaching our children something that is displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, something that is in contradiction to the practice of His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This requires the parents to be active وَنَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الْكَسَلِ. One of the dua of the Prophet ﷺ, he sought refuge from many things with Allah Azza wa Jalla, and one of those was laziness and lethargy. To be lazy, and it's very easy to be lazy. The nafs is inclined towards wanting to relax and just take it easy. Just be at rest. Just be always chilling out. But the reality is that this is the place for action, the place for deed. This time that we have, it's the place for activity. It's darul amal, if you will. So this is extremely crucial. This is the beginning steps and stages for a proactive parent, is to learn the essentials of their faith, the very basics of their faith, and this is the minimum requirement. And doing this, as a parent, you have to become familiar as well with the resources that you have and are available to you, whether they are in your community or outside of the community. What books, for example, to read? What masajid or Islamic centers that you can take your children to? What schools are available, whether it's a full-time school or a weekend school or an after-school program? What is out there and available at your service to help you raise your children? Also, who is out there? This is also fundamentally important. Who is out there as a guide, as a leader, as a sheikh or an imam? Who is speaking, and who are they, and what are they all about? Parents have to know this, because today there are many people talking about Islam. There are many people expressing their opinions and their understandings of the deen. But as a parent, as a responsible parent, you need to know who they are and what they're about, so you can determine and decide which ones you're going to introduce into the life of your child, which ones you're going to take from, which ones you trust, which ones are authentic in their teaching and their preaching, as opposed to those that have honestly and sincerely erred. They have made mistakes. They have an abundance of them. They have an agenda, perhaps. They have a slant to their imparting knowledge of Islam. So these are the resources, and there are many resources, and a parent has to know. Believe it or not, there are many parents, because they have not been proactive, they don't know where to go or what to do, who to ask and where to learn. How do I attack this problem? How do I solve this issue? What do I do? What's my position as a parent? They have no idea. So you'll find that they just fall back on the norm, cultural norms, societal norms, and they end up just being negligent and running it further and further away from what they should be doing. So this is about understanding the faith. The next thing, of course, is, as I hinted at, is understanding the environment. As a parent, you have to understand the environment in which your child is growing up. The environment that they're growing up in is not the environment that you grew up in, even if it's in the same location. Even if it's the same location, it will not be the same. As the passing of time, things change. So what worked for your parents, that might not work for you as a parent. A lot of times you'll hear parents or grandparents will say, well, when you were a kid, I used to do this, that, and the other. When you were a kid, I used to do this, that, and the other. Now, some of those things may be timeless parenting tools and techniques. And there are some timeless tools and techniques. However, there are some things that will be outdated and will not work. If you're trying to raise your kid the way you were raised, without taking into consideration the changes that have occurred, the differences of their location, their time, their culture, all of that stuff, then you may be missing the mark. You may not be addressing the problem as it has to be addressed. If you're not up to date with what's going on, you may not even see the problem for what it is. I'll give you an example of that. Some parents, they remember or they know a certain reality about the cell phone. The cell phone is used to call and it's used to communicate. And so when their young kid comes and they ask for a cell phone, even though they may have the most up-to-date phone, they have no idea what it's capable of or how to use it, except for the function of calling, either making a call or answering a call, or perhaps, if they're very savvy, how to send a text message. So the child comes and says, I need a cell phone. She says, yeah, sure, why not? I can reach you at school, or I can call you and tell you to come out when it's time to leave, or if I need to get a hold of you, they give the cell phone, and they don't understand what this device is capable of. If you're not in touch with that, you can find that the child is looking at everything, listening to everything, communicating with everyone on every moment of the day, and this can lead to a very, very difficult problem that you have no idea is taking place right in your own home. From your pocket, from your wallet, you spent the money to give, and it turned out to be a musibah because you weren't up to date with what's going on. You weren't in tune, right? It's easy for adults to lose sight of what's happening. We can create our own little microcosms of a society as an adult. We can become insulated ourselves. We're old enough and mentally mature enough to do that, to pick and choose and to restrict ourselves to things. I go home, I go to work, I go to the masjid. That's all I do. When I go home, I don't turn the TV on, or I don't open the internet. That's not my thing. It was never my thing. I didn't grow up doing that. I was outside playing this and that, and I'm too old to do that now. So my existence is based on a couple of things, but children, they are exposed to so much today in such a very rapidly changing culture that the proactive parent has to be involved. They have to be in tune. They have to know what's going on so that they can see the potential harms and dangers or the potential benefits of the choices the child is going to have to make. When we can identify what's happening, we'll be able to identify the challenges. We'll be able to identify, this is a challenge. Look, you want the cell phone? I'll give you a cell phone. I'll go buy you one of the little flip phones, the old one, you know, the old school one. It doesn't have a touch screen on it. It's just the buttons. You just pick it up. Hello, that's it. If that's the phone you want, I'll get it for you. And then, because I'm in tune with what's going on and available, I'll tell the service provider it only accepts 2 numbers. Mommy and daddy's number. That's an option on your cellular plan, by the way. You can have a phone, it only accepts 2 numbers, mommy and daddy's number. That's the only numbers that work on it. Maybe auntie's number if you need for emergency. That's it. I'm in tune with what's going on. So I can prevent a possible problem in the future. If I don't know, if I'm not in tune, if I'm not aware of what's going on, then I just give it and then we run into a situation. You identify the challenges. Another thing as a challenge here to identify is society at large. And this Al-Minhaal Academy is based on a number of things. One of the biggest functions that it serves here is a school, providing a secure environment for school-age kids to grow up in, to be educated in, to be developed and nurtured. That might not be the case for all families. They may have to send their kids out to the public school system. I went through the public school system myself. And I went through it as a non-Muslim, so the expectations were very different from me. The culture was very different from me. So sometimes we have to send our kids there, and if that's the case, then as a parent, we have to be very, very aware of what's going on in the public school system. If we're just thinking, oh, no, everything's great, everything's fine, it's a public school, I mean, it's run by the government, it must be okay, I mean, they must be doing the right thing. If we give it our best, if we can put our best imagination towards it and expect it would run that way, then we are just fooling ourselves and we're being very reactive or inactive But a proactive parent is going to understand what's going on in the public school system today. The teachers, the culture of teaching now in American school system has changed drastically. The culture of students changes constantly. What they are introduced to in terms of the negative, from our perspective, the negative aspects of culture, it is being introduced earlier and earlier into their worlds. And I'll give you a good example of that. So when I was going through the school system, which was not too long ago, they always have an acknowledgement of the holidays. And we're in the holiday season right now. So in February, there's a holiday called Valentine's Day. This may be a foreign idea to you. But in the school system, when I was in second, third grade, the earliest I can remember, Valentine's Day, which is a day of love, you have to pick a Valentine's. Or multiple Valentines. Which means you go and you get a love letter with a heart and perhaps the little rendering of the baby with wings and the little, they call it Cupid, that shoots the arrow of love into the heart. And then you put a little lollipop, with a little heart-shaped lollipop, or they give you these little candies that say, hug me, kiss me, love me, these types of things, these little candies. And then what happens is you have to give it to your classmates. You have to pick a Valentine. Now, when I was coming up, you pick a Valentine of the opposite gender. You go and, for me, it was, you pick a girl, she's also in the second grade, little bow in the hair, and so innocent and tender and sweet, and you say, here's my Valentine, hug me, love me, blah, blah, to the end of it. And you give. And the teachers are going, oh, that's so cute. That's so cute, look. And some of the parents are going, oh, you know, little Johnny has a Valentine and it's so sweet. And it may be one day, it may just be one day. And some parents I've heard, oh, it's just one day, it's just one day. But it's a message that you're sending to that child. It's a culture that you're dumping them into. This is okay. This is what they do here. This is what happens here. And if you don't know that it's going on, you're going to come later to the Imam or the Sheikh and you say, listen, I just found out that my however old daughter or son has a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And even worse than that, and it's not out of this world because it happens all of the time, they're pregnant. So we need to do a quick marriage so we can cover this up. It started at this time. This is when it started. This is when it was introduced. Right, so if you're not careful of what's going on, what's happening in that environment, then you'll watch as years go on. So the first year, it's very innocent. They just give the candy and to the end of it. As they grow older and develop physically, because adolescents, our kids are developing physically faster than they are mentally. So their ability to understand consequences and outcome and result of things is not as solid as the desire, it's not as strong as the desire of the physical body. Right? So in this particular case study here, if you will, it's very possible and very likely that they will end up in such a scenario. The next year, as the Valentine's thing, as the love thing, as the relationships develop in school, because your kids are going to spend a lot of time in a large portion of their youth in school. They're going to develop relationships with people, whether that's the same gender or the opposite gender. And when you're in a culture which they promote this, that you should have close relationships with the opposite gender at a young age, then you can see the ingredients to a very bitter recipe from our perspective. So we have to be able to identify the challenges and then recognize the difficulty. When you can recognize the difficulty of something, how difficult it will be, imagine picturing yourself in a river that is running. The river is running. It's running downstream. It's running downstream. You've got to make it up. You picture how difficult it could be for you to swim against the stream, to go against the current. Because in our current situation there, society at large, there are a number of very, very fundamental elements of society that are running downstream while we are trying to run upstream. They are running downstream while we are trying to run upstream. So when our kids are in the middle of that, we have to understand how difficult the challenge is. That way we can take the appropriate steps, to take the necessary steps, to make a rational, logical decision as to what are the steps that have to be taken in order to see to the success of the child's development. If we don't acknowledge the difficulty, then we may not choose the right option for them. We may not understand what the best approach is. The difficulty of it has to be assessed. And right now it is very difficult for these young kids when they are in the middle of such an environment, such a culture. If they are left to go in it without any guidance, without any supervision, then their percentage of successful outcome is lessened. Except for those that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows His abundant mercy upon. There are those rare cases, very rare, that a kid will just go through such a setting and they will come out unscathed. Very rare. The majority is not such. And we can see this as part of our faith. Part of our faith is understanding culture and environment, acknowledging that, and then acting accordingly. And I give as an evidence for this the hadith of the man who killed 99 men. Everyone should be familiar with this very famous hadith. In his road to repentance, he was given the option that if he wanted true repentance and to be forgiven, he had to leave the environment in which he was, an environment of evil, harm, corruption, and had to go to the environment of goodness and righteousness, because the environment plays such a crucial role. So here we go back to the first hadith, that the parents, they are the ones that change them. فَأَبَوَاهُ يُهَوِّدَانِهِ أَوْ يُنَصِّرَانِهِ أَوْ يُمَجِّسَانِهِ. They change them to be this, that, or the other. It's not just the parents that do that. If the parents aren't engaged and involved, it will be their substitute. It will be the substitute of the parents that will do that. So if it's not you that's actively guiding and leading your child to an end, a result, a goal, it will be their environment, their friend, their teachers, their classmates that will lead them to the end. They will change them from this into something totally different. So when we're able to recognize the difficulty and we're able to understand the challenges, we can equip ourselves. We can equip ourselves with the proper tools that are necessary. The proper tools that are necessary, and we can use those tools in the proper manner. Everyone wants their children to be successful, and it is possible for them to be successful in this life as well as maintain their identity as Muslims and, inshallah, their success in the hereafter. They are not mutually exclusive. And this is what parents have to understand, is that you do not have to sacrifice one for the other. Because in the minds of many, that's the case. That if I want my child to be successful in this world and to be the cream of the crop in this life, that means we have to sacrifice the religious learning and development and the morality. But when you look at the Muslims, this was their morality and their strong adherence to their faith is what brought about their success. It's what brought about communal success at large. From a group of people that came out of the desert, they were just, initially where? Initially where? Just arguing amongst themselves in the deserts of Arabia. And this is what the world powers at the time, the world leaders, they acknowledged this. They said, what has caused these arguing Bedouins, they were so complacent in their just with what they had. You never saw they didn't come out of this area. They stayed there for the most part. So then all of a sudden they took over the world. They led the world. Not just in religious matters, but they led the world in all facets of life. They developed and they discovered and they explored. They contributed to society. And the initial element that was there that pushed them, وَبِاللَّهِ التَّوْفِيقِ, was their adherence to their faith, was their morality, it was their responsibility. So this is what we're looking for, is to plant today. To plant today, as was the planting of the Prophet ﷺ. When the Prophet ﷺ started his da'wah, it was just him and a few of his family members, a few of his closest companions. And through his lifetime, he saw his people, by and large, accept Islam. But it wasn't until later, after his passing, alayhi salatu wasalam, that we saw such fruit, such harvest from that initial effort come to pass. That Islam spread around the world until we reached right here in New Jersey. All over the Western world, you find masajid and marakis and Islamic centers and active communities and families. Right, so this is the idea here, is as a parent, we have to be very proactive and involved. We cannot be in neutral and expect things to just happen. Our situation is not one which allows us to be in neutral. If we came from a Muslim society that had a good, strong Islamic culture, it's possible that your parents could be in neutral and let the society help push the kids to meet the expectations and norms. A parent could just take a free ride. But here it's not possible because our children are swimming against the current. Or we're asking them to swim against the current. And so we have to be right there, pushing them along, urging them, helping them with all of the abilities that we have and all of the assistance that we can get from the community. So I'll conclude with this for today, and we'll leave the next couple of topics in this particular workshop, Proactive Parenting, which will be creating safe spaces for our children, and then talking about clear communication, and that will be, inshallah, tomorrow, inshallah ta'ala, it will be tomorrow at 11 a.m. So I thank you all for your attentive listening, and we'll open the floor if there are any questions. I'll be happy to entertain those to the best of my ability. Jazakallah khair. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa akhiru da'wana. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.